Welcome to Let's Take a Walk, brought to you by the Feld Group Institute. Today we're visiting Charlie in 1998. He talks about IT as a team sport and how values, accountability, and quality turn culture into performance. This still feels fresh almost 27 years later. Let's listen in.
High performance IT really has a lot to do with team sport because nobody does anything by themselves anymore. I mean, programmers need systems engineers need operations people. And unless there's a sharing within those organizations and across those organizations of the same set of beliefs and the same set of how things should get done and the way things should work, you're going to get the normal interference and dissipation of power and energy in the organization, as opposed to people that really understand that they need the people next to them. They value the people next to them, right? So screaming and yelling is not lots of times people know how to get things done, but they don't know how to get things done within the value system. And you get a lot of questions of, well, do you want me to be nice to these people? Or you want me to get this done? Well, I want you to do both, right? That's what this is about. And, what you find is in the first few months of having to call a timeout every once in a while, when you start seeing emails going back and forth where people are starting to politicize the process, starting to position things, starting to, send daggers across the room to people. You get a group together, or you pull the leadership team together and say, wait a second, timeout. What did we just agree that we do, right? We just agreed that we wouldn't have excuses, that we'd work together, that we wouldn't, try to be defensive about things. And here we are having these kind of finger pointing arguments, right? Just take the document out, read it, and then go back and think about what's happened in the last couple of weeks. After you do a couple of those, then people begin to get into the rhythm of things. And then on an individual basis, I think you've got to continue to work with people. Again, the question comes back often is, do you want me to get results, or do you want me to be nice to these people? Well, if you truly believe that you get better results over a longer period of time, if people love to get up and come to work in the morning and respect you and trust you and aren't afraid of you and all of these other things, then, it's a question that shouldn't have to be answered, right? It should be obvious that you'd get the job done through people. Another question that comes up a lot is the project's running late, right? I've got to have people come in and work the weekends, right? Do I force them to come in and work the weekends? Well, the answer is that you got to get the job done, but why do you think the people are not as committed as you are? If you've got to ask them to come in and work the weekend, your job ought to be, if you're doing this right, trying to send them home so they can get some rest, as opposed to making them come in to work the weekend. Because most people, if they were committed to your project, and it was their project too, not just something you made up, they wouldn't go home until it was over. One of the things that IT people really value is quality work. The reason they value quality work is if it's not quality, they feel bad, first off. And secondly, and probably as important, is they're going to get the calls in the middle of the night when stuff's not working. So they tend to be more conservative, right? On the user side or on the customer side, people really don't understand the complexity of putting things together. I mean, how hard could it be to build a handheld computer application? Well, the difficulty is not in the handheld. The difficulty is in the network and the databases and all the recovery facilities, and so that when it gets out into the salesman's hand, it doesn't break down. Yeah, it works every day, right? Or even more important than an airline, right? You got people waiting in line in airports. I mean, this stuff has to work. The trick is to have the kind of culture where people will sign up, but have such trust in the leadership team that they believe it when you say it's not going anywhere until it's ready, right? And that requires two things: is one, the leaders to be in touch and involved and realistic about what's working and what's not working. And also the leadership team having the courage to talk to the senior leadership of the company and say, this is not ready. I said it was going to be ready, right? We're, a month late. I need another month to get this stuff to really work right. Everybody will be better off if we do. And that requires pretty strong leadership. In a lot of cases, the culture rewards people for setting a conservative plan and getting it done on time, right? In other cases, there's a reward for signing up for things with reasonable amounts of information and then getting it done almost on time. If almost on time is a year earlier than perfectly on time, right, the question you've got to ask is, what's better for the company? What's better for the shareholders? What's better for the employees? And so forth. So finding that right balance between studying things to death, making conservative estimates, numbers, dates that you could always beat, versus just pulling dates out of the air that nobody could even figure out. Finding that middle ground and really getting this resiliency around the dates and continue to work toward delivering generally on time, as opposed to worrying about whether you're going to make it or not make it, is really high performing cultures. In a lot of cases, the heads of IT organizations push things out the door, and a prototype becomes a rollout, right? And the rollout doesn't work. I committed at Delta that we would not push the gate and boarding system beyond Jacksonville until it was ready for prime time, but that we were going to go to Jacksonville on September 14th, right? And on September 14th, we went to Jacksonville. I also told them that in the end, if we've done everything we can to get to Jacksonville on September 14th, and we need another month, right? We're not going to be reckless with the application or the technology or the people. After a while, you build credibility into the culture where people understand, hey, let's sign up, let's get after it, and let's not worry about all the things that can go wrong. Let's focus on getting it done with the belief that I can trust the leadership to not just push things out that are not high enough quality. I think what happens is pretty early on, certain teams really start clicking, right? And you find that in a lot of cases, the people on the team actually went out and saw the customers, right? I mean, they got committed to the idea early, right? Instead of sitting there in a box in a programming cubicle, they might have gone out to an airport or to a train yard or to a distribution center and saw how hard life was and how long the lines were, right? They get committed to a higher order of things early on, right? The second thing is, as they begin to put the project together, they're involved in coming up with the estimates and the time frames, right? And, if you get those things going for you, then people own the work, right? They believe that they're doing something that they have some control over, that they signed up to go do, as opposed to a few people go out and look at the lines or go into a distribution center or a supermarket and watch how the salesmen work. And the programmers sit there in their cubes and somebody passes them a piece of paper with a ridiculous date that they couldn't figure out why anybody ever came up with that date or really what the value of what they're doing is. Those things become part of high performing organizations. But, I've tried to separate out values from leadership competencies because you could basically be a good leader, but just have bad values, right? I mean, good leaders with bad values are pretty destructive to a society. We've seen it out throughout history, right? In terms of people that could rally people toward a shared vision. The problem was it was a bad shared vision. It was a bad idea, right? I've also seen people with good values, but without the leadership skills to get things done and to change the environment and to make a difference. The really two pieces of the pie are strong leadership competencies sitting on top of very strong values that people can relate to. So the first part was in and around values, how we treat each other, respecting each other, respecting diversity, respecting the fact that I've got to depend on you, and team kinds of things. Take that and add to it the leadership competencies that mobilize those values on a day-to-day basis, right? And then you have a tremendous formula for success. It's interesting because I was trying to think about, I'm not sure pattern recognition is a word that people relate too much or a phrase that people relate to too much, but if you go back to the SAT, you go into college, you see three pictures and you see a fourth one, and the fourth one's different. I mean, there's a pattern there, right? I mean, what's the same about a banjo and a violin and the tuba and, a chair, right? Well, some are easy to see, and most things in history have been pretty well laid out like that. You can see the first three pieces, and then you can make an assumption about the third. What's happening now is there's such a spread between cause and effect right? So things that people did 20 years ago are showing up in the environment now, right? Things that go on. I mean, just the stock market activity of the last few months, where you know the Asian economy has trouble, and all of a sudden everybody's got trouble, right? You can't see things anymore, right? If you're so analytical that you're down in the details, right? You've got to be able to get up on a high enough mountain to see the patterns, right? And to see the repetitiveness of things, and to make jumps of 2 and 3 steps, which means you've got to listen better. You've got to pay attention. You've got to read more. You've got to surround yourself with people that have different opinions, with people that came from different places, right? And pattern recognition, strategic thinking, the ability to see things that aren't there, right, really is becoming a more and more important skill for leadership. And I think that part of the ability to recognize patterns is to really have a pretty good knowledge base of kind of, you might call it the lay of the land. I mean, I truly believe that I could go into a building, spend a half hour walking around, right, and then sit down and come pretty close to the health of the technology in that company, even the relationship between the CEO and the CIO, how technology gets funded. And I haven't asked anybody a question, right? Because if you walk into a building and you see a pattern of very diverse technology, of different things on everybody's desk, chances are there's no central thought process around kind of a networking of similar kinds of emails and desktops, and which probably means that there's no vision, there's no technology vision for the company, which probably means that the CIO is very isolated from the CEO. Right now, that's a pattern assumption you could make pretty quick, and then with another few hours of talking to people, you can verify or not verify it. So looking for the clues, looking for the pieces, becomes an important part of pattern recognition. The other thing is to really look at kind of understanding that a merger has certain characteristics, whether it's in a railroad or in an oil company or in a bank, right? That a lot of what might be going on in an airline, which was a regulated business, right, 15 years after regulation, is probably similar to things that went on in a consumer goods company, right? But it really requires a mind that's looking for patterns, looking for overlays, as opposed to one that goes very deep into the analytics. And one of the flaws in IT people, one of the strengths and flaws in engineering people, is it's very precise work. It's very analytical work, right? And therefore being in touch with the details, but then being able to step back and make some assumptions, right? And then verify the assumptions becomes an important part of leading an IT organization.
Thanks for walking back in time with us. If this clip resonated, share it with a teammate and leave a quick review for us. For more conversations and clips from the Feld Group Institute, subscribe and check the show notes. We'll see you next time.